Good day. Welcome to our Bid More YouTube channel. Bid More is a program that equips local small businesses to win contract bids at local, state, federal, and other organizational levels. This YouTube channel is dedicated to training and coaching local and small businesses on estimating and proposal writing. We encourage you to subscribe to this Bid More channel to receive updates, tips, and guidelines so that you are empowered and have the confidence to bid more and win more contract bids. Thank you.
Good day. Welcome to the Bid More weekly webinar. Bid More is a program that equips local small businesses to win contract bids at the local, state, federal, and other organizational levels. During this live webinar, you will hear tips and best practices from trained experts on topics related to estimating and proposal writing. For even more free tips to help you create more informed bids and estimates, subscribe and like our YouTube channel entitled Bid More. Remember, the Bid More program encourages you to use every opportunity available to you to sharpen your saw to bid more and win more. At this time, please use the Q&A chat to post your name, business name, the services you provide, and what you would like to learn from today's webinar, as well as to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Enjoy.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about bid minimum requirements. Today we will interview Mr. Aaron Shalanson, and we also have Alex Fisher joining us as well as we dive into our topic for today. So without any further ado, Aaron, Alex, are you all ready?
Yep.
Wonderful. Let's get started. So again, Bid More 5 steps for proposal writing. As you can see, they are: what is the requested scope of work? What are bidding requirements, including minimum requirements, evaluation criteria, and submission instructions? What are required forms and guidelines for completing each form? What are the required bidder documents? And what is the required pricing structure? This particular presentation will be about minimum requirements. So let's get started. And we're going to start off with a very basic, fundamental question. What is the definition of minimum requirements? So, Aaron, let's get started.
Okay, so minimum requirements is essentially a list designated to evaluate like a minimum set or minimum criteria that the solicitor establishes. So essentially, vendors need to meet these most basic requirements to even enter into the bid process. It's a great way for solicitors to filter out the top most needed things for a bidder to have in place or to meet for them to even place the bid. So it's fair across it's fair across all scopes to each and every vendor because everybody has the same set of established minimums requirements.
Okay, so basically minimum requirements kind of also helps weed out favoritisms or things like that, right? Just to, so everybody has kind of an equal playing field.
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Now let's go on to our next one. What section contains minimum and or other names for minimum requirements? So if I'm new at this and I'm looking at a solicitation, where would I find minimum requirements, or, is there even another name for it?
Yeah, Terry. So for this one, it's going to kind of vary a little bit. Sometimes it'll be directly referenced as an example. It'll be called minimum requirements. There's a section, with that title, and that's where you start. Sometimes it can be called minimum requirements for contractors, like in RFPs. Other cases, which I would say I see more often than not, it's not necessarily clearly defined. So what I usually like to do, is to say, like, always look out for that proof of minimum requirements title or minimum requirement title. And if you don't see it, then your general requirements or requirements section is your minimum requirements. So with that being said, not all solicitations contain the minimum requirements, just requirements. So to give an example of that, contractual services type solicitations, they often don't contain a minimum requirement. It just says requirements. So in this case, you would consider all requirements as your minimum requirement. It's up to the vendor essentially to select what is most important to them as a company to be sure that they meet those requirements.
Hey, this is Alex. Just to chime in, I've also seen it called like bidders requirements, but generally it includes that word requirements in the title.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Alex and Aaron. So that would stand to reason that, it's pretty much, we're gonna see that term requirement. So, all right, that's good to know. Thank you so much. And what are some examples of the most common minimum requirements?
All right, yes, this one is actually a great question. Okay, so some of them that, believe it or not, are common for both, county and federal level solicitations are document requirements like licensing, insurance requirements, proof of business registration, tax receipt, financial standing like bank statements, and even in some cases there are physical minimum requirements. And what I mean by that is you have to be present on a property to do a walkthrough inspection, and you have to sign off at the location for that. You may be required to attend a meeting, a pre-bid meeting, and you have to sign off at the meeting that you were present. Also, there can even be regional restrictions, a type of physical minimum requirement. Like, for example, you can only bid if your business is in a particular county or city. So there are several, those I would say are the most common ones that I have seen.
Okay, all right, thank you. Alice, do you have anything you'd like to add? If not, we can go on.
It sounded like Aaron covered most of them.
All right. Okay. Let's see. I think maybe our next slide, Aaron, do you have examples for us to look
Yes.
at?
Yes. Okay. So
Wonderful.
this is an example of a minimum requirement section. And one of the things that, I like to point out that's highlighted here is requirements. That's what you're going to see, and that's what you really need to consider. Your minimum requirements are where you start, but not end, because minimum means that this is the bare minimum to enter the bid, but there are more requirements to follow. Now, in other situations where it's just the requirements, those are your minimum or overall requirements. So I highlighted these particularly because that's what you need to look for first. Be sure you meet these requirements. And this is a good example of a few minimum requirements, proof of applicable local business tax, bidder must be engaged in the business. So moving on, bidders must provide at least 3 verifiable business references. This one is a big one. I cannot say I do not see this on almost every single solicitation. They always want at least some kind of reference when it comes to submitting a bid or a proposal. And you want to be sure that you can at least obtain these references at the minimum amount that they want. Sometimes people may only have, they just starting out and they may only have 2, and I wouldn't say let that discourage you. Ask the question, submit a question before the question due date and ask them, can this be waived? That's a more appropriate approach for that. But, make sure that you at least have a few references that you can submit is best practice for any solicitation. And also this one is a good example of a particularly unique minimum requirement because this came from one in which they were looking to purchase buses or vehicles. So they want, as a minimum requirement, they want a full description of the vehicles in this one. So with this, it illustrates that minimum requirements can often be quite common, and even some minimum requirements can be quite specific.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate this example. Thank you for sharing this. So let me ask you a question. So of course this is off the cuff, but if I don't meet any of these minimum requirements, do you have any suggestions for me?
If you can't meet, if you can't meet any of them at all, it may be time to reevaluate whether or not you should be bidding on this project. But now let's say that you may not meet one or two of them. You can ask the city, you can send them, you can request a special consideration for your business and see if they will give you like a special accommodation for not meeting like one requirement or possibly two. Also, it doesn't hurt to submit it as a question whenever during the question period of the proposal and bid process. Just make sure that you view this well before the question date and that you're prepared to ask them before the deadline on the questions, because it's very hard to get the city to consider anything after that period.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Let's go keep moving. So this looks like another example. So what is this an example of, Aaron? What are we going to talk about?
This one I pulled out because it's an example of a more physical type requirement. This one was pulled directly from a construction contract. As you can see, I did not highlight this in yellow. This is how it looks on the actual bid document. They highlight it in very bright yellow. That is to call to your attention. This is the minimum requirements for this project. So essentially this one is a good example of how you have to do a mandatory contractor walkthrough. You have to visit the property. You have to be present within 5 minutes of the date. You have to, and further later on in a different section of this particular document is the dates that the walkthroughs are held. So you have to meet that requirement. If you miss the walkthrough and you submit this document, they'll cross-reference and check that you were present for that walkthrough, and you will be totally excluded from the process because you did not do it. So it's always very, very important, especially with with construction type jobs, that you check that you meet those requirements.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Aaron. I appreciate that example. And let's see, moving on. Why do the minimum requirements exist? What's the purpose?
Minimum requirements exist because they often signify or easily identify they're easily identified on a solicitation to provide an exact requirement that is fair to all bidders across the board. These minimum requirements are often the most important requirements. So it's kind of funny to think about, okay, the minimum requirements are the most important, and that essentially is how you have to think about it. Because if you have a document containing a minimum requirement section, that's where you want to start. So just because it's a minimum, doesn't mean it's not the most important.
That's true. That is true. All right. Thank you for that. And what are some pitfalls to avoid when reviewing minimum requirements?
Um, I was thinking about this question a lot. People often get kind of hung up or overwhelmed on technical requirements in general. All right, so with that being said, don't let sets of requirements, whether it be minimum or the overall project requirements, discourage you. Um, you know, also don't start late because you really need the time to think about and decide, is this contract for you as a business? And with that being said, at times of uncertainty, or, as I said earlier, if you may not meet a particular requirement, submit a question, submit it as a question,
Mhm.
ask, can you be exempt from this? Or, does, this requirement seems a bit unfair to all businesses. Can this be, can this requirement be excused for all small businesses or all businesses in general? And they will often, they will consider it and often consider you for the exemption, or they'll write up an amendment and rework those requirements. So and with special exemptions for you know those special exemptions for requirements that you don't quite meet are there. It's possible. The worst they'll say is no. So it doesn't hurt to ask. By not asking and just giving up, you may be missing an opportunity as a whole.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So let's go on to what are best practices to include in your response for minimum requirements? Do we have examples of that as well, or are we just talking that through, Aaron?
So to answer this question, it goes back to a lot of what we've talked about in the past. Checklists, reading and understanding, the go, no go. We've talked about this in previous videos, and I'm repeating it here and now again because it is actually a very, very important practice. Whenever you're doing any part of the process of bidding and proposal writing, the number one best habit to start with is creating your checklist. Or even if a checklist is provided for you on the front of the document, after you read it, you may find that, okay, well, there's some other things that I need to get together for this. So always have your own checklist, and check it twice, as they say. Referencing that's your best way. Create a yes and no checklist, and you can't miss. You're sure to get everything. Also, time. Start early. Never start late, because when you rush through it, it shows in your work. You don't want to rush a project like this. You want it to be presentable. You want it to be legible. You want it to impress the city so that you win this contract. And, it's not, yes, they do often pick it because of lowest price, but you may be running very close to someone else whose proposal was written without error, and they're going to pick them, because of the level of professionalism. So that's very important. Always read and make sure you understand. Skim the solicitation first, and get your requirements together, create your checklist. Then go back and read it. Read the whole thing, through. Make sure that you are understanding what you are reading. So that way, when you create a proposal or submit a bid, you're not excluding something vitally important. Also, one of my favorite ones is creating a go, no go checklist. A lot of a lot of solicitations have common factors. And after a while, when you've been doing this, when you've been writing, when you've been submitting bids, when you've been writing these proposals, you start picking up on these most common themes, these most common requirements, the most common structures, you start learning, well, I'm always going to need this and this and this when I'm writing a proposal, and it's going to always need to go in this order, like cover page, cover letters. That's a good example. So after a while, you start learning that. Then you create what's called your go, no-go checklist. What is it out of these requirements have you come up with over time that you realize that you can do it, your company can do it, and then the factors that your company can't do. And then any proposals that have this, and this in it, when you read over the requirements, bam, you got your no go checklist, and everything on here is on the go side. So you're ready to go, whereas this proposal B has all these things that you have determined your company can't do it. So you've got a ton of I can't do this on your checklist, and you've got one or two I might be able to do this. That's a time to sit down and think, well, is this solicitation good for me as a business? Is it worth my time to write this up, and is it possible that I could win? So those are the best. Those are the best to have.
Sounds good. You're right. I think when you're talking about taking your time and reading through, that kind of reminded me, I was just talking to a local small business owner today, and she was submitting a response to a solicitation to the city. And she, of course, took her time. She had her checklist and, was taking her time and making sure that she met the minimum requirements, and she was about ready to submit. However, I don't think she attempted to start submitting in a timely fashion and missed the deadline by like a minute or two, and they would not accept her proposal. So kind of still feeding into this best practices, being aware of your time, I think probably would be a good best practice when you are ready to submit. You've met your minimum requirements and you're ready to go ahead and submit. I think time is also a good one. So let's keep going. We are looking at the end of our presentation. So thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you, Alex, for speaking with us today. I hope everyone has enjoyed this presentation. I hope they have gained a lot more information, had some questions answered about minimum requirements with a bid more proposals. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's Bid More webinar. We know you will use this knowledge, these tips, and this insight in your future bidding activities. Please use this time to ask your questions in the Q&A chat. And for even more free tips to help you create more informed bids and estimates, subscribe and like our YouTube channel entitled Bid More. Remember, the Bid More program encourages you to use every opportunity available to you to sharpen your saw to bid more and win more. Take care.
Thank you for making the time to watch this Bid More presentation. You will use this knowledge, insights, and tips in your future bidding activities. Remember, Bid More is a program that equips local small businesses to win contract bids at local, state, federal, and other organizational levels. This YouTube channel is dedicated to training and coaching local and small businesses on estimating and proposal writing. We encourage you to subscribe to this Bid More channel to receive updates, tips, and guidelines so that you are empowered to have the confidence to bid more and win more contract bids. Please kindly leave us your comments, questions, and suggestions to improve future programming for the benefits of many. Make it a fantastic day.